Hello and welcome back to Transcending Ascension. Today we have another live guest with us, Dr. Rita Louise, author of her newest book, Dang, It Was Me All Along. And I couldn't agree more with the subject, and I'm very excited to get talking with her today. So thank you today for being with us, Dr. Rita. I want to let you go ahead, take it over, and just tell everyone all about you and what you do.
Okay, so I am a medical intuitive. I have a degree as a naturopathic physician and a PhD in natural health counseling, which really focused on how our thoughts and emotions affect our health. So I work with people, with their health related issues, but with their relationships, helping them overcome trauma, dealing with their anxiety, pretty much anything that somebody throws on the table, because when you're working on an intuitive level, you just open yourself up to the guidance that you're going to receive and just go with it. Now, the book, and we can have a whole discussion about this, the book is not based on my professional experience, but based on my personal experience. Thus the dang, it was me all along.
Yes, yes, I love that when I read your book, and that's exactly how I teach too. And sometimes I feel bad because the people that watch me all the time, like, sorry, you guys have heard this story, but that is the way we relate to people. This is why, like, when you come from the pain, you are more impactful to people versus if you've never been through the pain yourself and you're just like, oh, I mean, I know we villainize them, but if you're like the fancy person that never had any problems and now it's easy enough to tell people with trauma, oh, just get over it. No, you have to
No.
go through the trauma before you can accurately help people out of it. So if you wanted to let us know, like, what was that thing, because we all have that moment, and there's lots of micro moments, but there's the bigger one we can always pick out, that this was the thing that I was like, no, really, enough is enough. And I've been like up ever since. Like, I have that moment. I'm sure you do. Lots of people do.
So, and I have to kind of backtrack the story, and I'm going to make a comment like to start off. So, when I wrote my last book, The Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and Narcissist, there was a bunch of healing stuff in it, finding boundaries, blah, blah, blah. But it was written from a very intellectual perspective and not from me actually implementing any. But anyway, so I discovered at this age that most of my relationships, including my romantic ones, were with narcissists, and I just kept entering this toxic cycle of relationships, even with my friends. And it was brought to my awareness, but I didn't really understand it and didn't understand how I got involved in this whole thing and what to do to change it or to heal it. Thus, the deep dive into this dynamic between empaths and narcissists. And, so by the time I was done with the book, I had started a new relationship. I felt confident that I had resolved all of my crappy relationship issues and I was going to test it out in this new relationship. And the guy seemed really great. And, even though there were red flags up front, which I obviously didn't pay attention to because I thought it was my stuff coming to the surface, and I was scared, which turned out to not be true. Anyway, so that relationship ends. COVID is winding down. My business isn't doing good, and I am left with basically, in my mind at the time, nothing. And I was miserable, not just because the relationship was ending, but because I've had my practice for years and years, and I was looking at getting a day job, and that was even being challenging. And it's like, okay, you have all these skills and experience, and you do web page stuff, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you can't even get a job for $20 an hour. I'm like, really? So I was not in a good place. And all I wanted was to be happy. That was really all I wanted. That was the bottom line. But I didn't know if that was something you could pursue or if that was something that you could bring into your life, because I know I've had moments of happiness, but that wasn't like a day-to-day thing. Like I never really felt content with my life. So thus started this new deep dive, which I discovered very early on, that happiness wasn't something that, I mean, it's something you experience, but it's also something that is a goal, and it's something that you can cultivate in your life. And I was on board. So thus started the deep dive into understanding what was going on inside of me, because, in the end of all of this, the only one left standing was me. And so if I didn't change me, then I was just going to continue in these patterns that were not serving my highest good.
Yeah.
Look.
Yeah. No, I felt it when I was going through it. Like, it's exactly what I'm always trying to say to people. It was really well put. I recommend it. Like, there's a lot of books that you read and they go on and on and on and on the whole book to say like one thing. And it's like, and they bring, examples from the past and the future, and it's all nice and well, but yours is like almost like a manual. Like, it's a manual, and this is clear cut instructions of this is what we do. Like, life isn't great, but this is what we do to make it better. This is what we do to make it better. And that's like what we need right now, is to cut through that. And it's funny you said the happiness thing, because one thing that was one of those bigger breakthroughs for me, not the biggest, but because you hear all about affirmations and all this, and I've been through them all, and well, not all, but lots. And it wasn't until I invented my own, just going, I am happy. Because at the end of the day, that's all we want. It's not, success is because it's going to make us happy. Family is because it's going to make us happy. Even love, it's because it's going to make us happy. So if we just go, I am happy, that's it. And I found big breaks after that, and just cutting out like cutting out the fat, that term, like that's what your book does. And that's just with putting that goal simply as I am happy. I want to be happy, because the rest figures itself out. Like, the rest takes care of itself if you just do that. So I found that fantastic with your book.
And I like that. I've never thought to just use that as an affirmation. Like, I don't know if it's me, or if this is something that other people experience. And I talk about it in the book, is using affirmations, like, a lot of them are like, I am rich and successful and I have great hair and people love me. And my brain is going, right, nah. And it's like, so how is this going to help me if I keep repeating it and my brain keeps going, well, maybe not so much. I just didn't find value, but I am happy is just simple. And it's something that you can bring in, similar to, one of the things that I recommend in the book in a similar way is finding things that you can own about yourself. Like, I am smart. I can figure things out, and these are true statements about myself, and so when you say them, it raises your energy and it makes you feel more confident and it makes your vibration rise. And so I am happy doesn't like totally fall out of that realm of a very easy to own thing about yourself.
That is so true. That is so true. And it builds it up more and more in your mind. It's solidifying it, like from switching it, like vibration becoming the frequency that's actually going to be like our energy body aura, that's going to be our makeup. And it's funny because like you can go through your life and sometimes like it ends up being like people can think you're cocky or something, or because you're just unwilling to let that fall because it holds up your aura. Like when you hold strength of something of yourself, like when you know it for sure, you can never betray yourself and let that down. Like you said, I am smart. Like that's one of my things I go to because I'm physically not that strong. But if I can't do something, I just remind myself, you are smart. And then I can do that, and I'll figure out like, something, or at least I can have the mindset, I'll just put it till my husband gets here. You know what I mean? Like there's a way that when you decide your thing, or if your thing is you are strong, or whatever your thing is, when you build that up and never let it go, because that's the thing, there's so much in this world that wants to tear down our confidence, tear down our sovereignty, tear down our freedom, tear down our knowing that we can do things ourselves. They want us to feel like weak and small, and like, it's funny because when you like relationships, I feel like why they're so chaotic is because we are brainwashed for them to be chaotic in the music we listen to and the stories we're told, like in every single TV, anything program, and then even in parent dynamics, because women were very badly treated for a long, long, long time. And they show this dysfunction of love. There was no dysfunction with the love. There was a dysfunction, the balance of power. And now it's still not corrected. It's going the other way. And this, like that masculine feminine marriage fixes that right there when you understand your role within that. But again, you have to decide your role of where you lay in the feminine masculine role, because I don't believe the woman has to be solely the feminine and the male has to be solely the masculine. And that's very obvious in today's with the men even getting more effeminate. It's like clear the balance. But we decide this. So I love that right there, that you say that we need to put up our own armor there.
But, you know, when you talk about relationships, you know, and especially after marriage, you know, there's all of this effort put into the whole dating cycle, you know, and you're there for your partner and there's this intimacy. And it just seems like when people get married or move in together, you know, married even more so, it's like there's this line and nothing continues. Like we didn't plan for this because it's just supposed to be happily ever after and I don't have to do any work. And, you know, we have these preconceived mindsets of how things are supposed to be and they're not. But it's that brainwashing, it's that programming that we're told, you know, you're waiting for Prince Charming and they're supposed to be nice to you. Well, that has not been my personal experience, that, you know, all men are super nice to you.
They can be in a moment, but like in general, that's one of the things. Men are not really like overly nice all the time, especially when they say the happiest people are single women and married men, because there's a big switch that happens in men that I like, it's programming that like they just all of a sudden become useless. And like, and nowadays there's like very little excuse for it. Once upon a time, you could make the argument of, okay, you're working and this is just the woman's work, but now they both work and women are like dying extra than they used to. Like they're the ones having heart attacks now because women are not even built to work. Like the male system, I'm sure you would know this as a naturopathic doctor, that they run off testosterone. So they're meant to wake up, go to work, come home, go to sleep. You know what I mean? Like that flows with the testosterone system, where women, that's not how we flow. We flow in a monthly schedule where 1 week we'll have lots of energy, the next week we'll have none, and the next week we'll be crazy. You know, like we have more we're dealing with there to like put the, oh, you got to clean the house, cook the food, take care of the children, if there is any, which, you know, that's going either way. It's just chaos.
And work a full-time job.
Exactly. Just to barely scrape by too, because of everything they've done with the money system. It's just, we need to just break it down. Like I haven't had, like a real job in 8 years, like where I was working for the man. I've been making money off and on, and I am right now with different ventures that I make sure to stay sovereign in, like refusing to like have it be put through the government, because somebody's got to start going, no, you know what I mean? Somebody's got to just say, no, you have nothing to do with this. Like their hands have reached too far. And waking people up, this is why you just have to teach them to wake up. You don't need to like, there's some that are like, oh, the government, but it's like, if you just wake up, if you just heal, if you become a stronger person, because it makes you smarter and you can lead your own life. So is that what led you to write your book? Like to bring that strength forward to more people?
So I'm a pretty consummate researcher. So once I start on a deep dive, it's pretty deep. And one of the things that I like writing. I mean, this book is book number 7. You know, I've written hundreds of articles that have been published everywhere. So when I do this research, it's always in the back of the mind, this is going to turn into something, whether it's some articles or whatever. But as I worked on it, it just seemed more and more valuable. The message that was there, and the insights that were there. And when I wrote it, so some people, the way that I talk about it, they think that like I write these memoirs, which I do not write memoirs. I write research books, self-helpy type books. Although this one, of all of my books, I tell a lot of personal stories, and it comes out very frank and very, very me. It is written in my voice. And so if you kind of like my attitude and like my spiel, it comes through in the book. And I found it interesting, like the reviews on Amazon, so if anybody gets it and you like it, put a nice review. Most of them say, it's like talking to your next door neighbor. It's like talking to your best friend, because it's just written in okay, so this is what I did, and it was a big mistake. And so maybe you could try doing it this way, or, then I tried doing it this way and it worked a lot better, and so it's not, you read a lot of books and they're very heady. And so you feel the vibration, but there's not really like, well, how do I apply this to me? And how do I apply this to my life? And I'm going to go on a totally giant tangent here. So I wanted to learn how to be psychic when I was like 13 years old, and started reading books and never really could figure it out. The best I could figure out was if you became enlightened, because that was the word of the day, then psychic abilities would be kind of a byproduct of that. So I started reading all of this stuff. I mean, I have a huge library of, self-help, personal growth books and stuff. And I mean, I knew I had some intuition, but not that I could count on. Went to the Berkeley Psychic Institute, studied with them, and 3 weeks into the program, what I discovered was that I had been very freaking psychic my whole life, but nobody's told me, like nobody made the connection. If you walk up to a workmate and look them in the face because they weren't there the day before and go, well, where were you yesterday? Having them check for a brain tumor, only to find out that that was where they were the day before, that's not just some weird synchronicity. It is you having a psychic experience. And so I feel like when I write so that people get it. I want them to get it. I don't want to talk up here. I want to talk here so that they get it in their body, because it's only when you feel it here that you can maybe incorporate it into your life.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And that came through with your book. And that's why, like, it was all perfectly written. It was all hitting home. And it's funny because as someone that's already been through those things, I could just see the power it would hold for someone that hasn't healed those things yet. Like, nobody's ever done healing, but there's a very big difference to being in that place of poor me, everybody does stuff to me, to switching to, yeah, you might still have some problems here and there, but it's your fault. Like, somehow energetically, even if it's past life, somehow it's your fault, because that's just the way the universe is orchestrated. It works no other way. But if somebody just says that to you, that's upsetting. I've experienced this with people, the push and pull. That's upsetting information. But with your book and how you lay it out of, I'm not coming at you for your mistakes. I have made these mistakes. Here they are. here is what I've learned from them. And plus, you have all the because you call it self-help. Yours transcends that. You have tons of metaphysical information in the book. Like, just it's filled with metaphysical information, and pairing that psychological information with the metaphysical. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Dion Fortune. She's one of my
yeah.
Oh, good. She's one of my favorite people, but she did that. She was like in the Carl Jung side of things, but brought it together with occultism. And that is where, like, I have found, I mean, other people find different ways where they transcend, but that is where I find my transcendence right there, is that combination of understanding that, because they are one and the same, the all is mind. So if we can fix it that way, then it fixes the other way.
But what I found that was the most fascinating aspect in doing this research, so I talk about the subconscious mind, which houses like our ego and our programming, so if something happens, we react based on that programming, so it's either we feel good or we feel like crap, and that's where our inner critic is, that part of us that criticizes ourselves and says things to us that we would never, ever, 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 ever say out loud to anybody else. It's usually pretty brutal. But then there is talking about better emotions, talking about happiness, talking about joy, talking about enthusiasm, talking about emotions that are higher vibrating, that raise your energy. When you're in a moment of joy, when you're standing on the side of a mountain and looking at this beautiful vista, you have these moments of just being filled with awe and joy, and your energy moves and you're uplifted. And it's like, how do you have that in your life? Shockingly, when you look from a psychological perspective, and look at the literature, there's nothing. And I was amazed. They can sit there and talk about every aberration of crappy mental brain you could have. But when it comes to being happy and experiencing joy in your life, they got nothing. They have like 3 or 4 tools, try journaling, and it's that mental thing. And where I found the shift, where I found people talking about these higher vibrating emotions, came out of spiritual texts, came out of religious texts, came out of like Eastern culture, blah, 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 which I was already very familiar with. But I wanted it to be couched in a more psychological persuasion, to not offend people. I live in Texas, total Bible Belt. I didn't want to offend people. I wanted it to reach a more general audience, to not put in things that are considered spiritual or religious and offend anybody. And so if you couch it in psychological, you can kind of throw some spiritual in there and make your point. But there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. And so there's an entire chapter in this book of me apologizing for using the terms that I do, and talking about connecting to God, and talking about being in the flow, and talking about the soul, and talking about these concepts that, are considered religious and are considered spiritual and are considered these things, because there was nothing else to use. There was no other vocabulary. It was like, sorry, I apologize in advance.
It's true. It's, I'm honestly, at this point, this is why I became a minister, because it's sorry, not sorry at this point, to both of them, to the Christians alike, because they are such a huge population. They're letting us down, because if we had that power behind like the movement, that we'd be done. We'd be in the utopia now, because they have such a large population. And then you have your atheists, who are also an enormous population. And those are the ones I usually speak to, because I used to be one. I was raised one, which is very rare. Well, not anymore. All the kids nowadays pretty much are getting raised that way, but I'm like an OG raised atheist. And they're a growing danger. They're more dangerous, because they're pure darkness. But they get offended if you mention God. Like it's insanity. And I've seen it firsthand. My family's like that. So like oh man, like my own mother she already passed, but we're interning her. And there's been huge family arguments about not mentioning God. I'm like, I'm a minister. I'm her oldest child. I'm not to mention God. They even recommended I don't speak. I'm like, oh my God. Like, that is top notch. Don't mention God. The person's actually passed, but she was an atheist, and it would be disrespectful to mention God. Like, wow, we've gone really far in how deep atheism will go. But like you were saying before with psychology, this is why they don't actually cure anything, because there's no other way to put the words, because there's no other way to do it, because you have to align with the divine. It is the only way. That is how you find healing. So either like you have the Christians that are doing it correctly because they're throwing away their power and going, oh, Father, save me, where it's got to come from within. And then the atheists that are literally dangerous, like the whole mass population, it's probably what's causing all the disasters on earth and everything, because like that whole Santa Claus, you have to believe it's true, except it's not for Santa Claus, it's for the divine.
But when I'm talking about this process, it's not, and I just want to say this out loud to the listeners, it's not about a belief system. It's not about believing in Jesus. I mean, there's certain thing about believing in God, but God is just a word. It's this energy, it's this force.
It's called the divine, right? Like
divine, yeah. There's lots of words that express that experience, but every one of us, I guarantee you, whether you're a Christian or a Hindu or an atheist, have been in the flow of divine energy at some point in time in their life. Everyone has. And when you're in that flow, when you are in that energy, your vibration raises and you always feel happy. You always feel joyful. You always feel whole and content. And so my point is, what do you need to do to get in that flow? I mean, I'm sorry about the vocabulary, but it's not about believing in something. It's about owning and accepting. This is how my body works. This is how I operate. And if I want this, then I have to just accept. This is how it works. It's not a belief. We've all experienced it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Going back to the psychic stuff, I teach classes on psychic abilities, and I do a lot of like presentations at conferences talking about psychic abilities. And I'll talk about, like clairvoyance or clairsentience and whatever, and give a example, like clairsentience, all right, so how many people have felt the vibes in the room, or how many of you have walked up to someone and just like felt their bad mojo, raise your hand. And the entire room raises their hand. And it's like, but you can't have a clairsentient experience if you're Christian. It's like, but you are, because that's just how we work, And so when I sit there and talk about that connection and being in the flow, it's not a belief. It's a fact of life, of how our body operates.
100% agree, like 120,000% agree. And that's like why, like people, not that we're doing the same thing, but people like us that are growing in numbers, that are coming and just feeling that push to teach and teach and teach and teach and teach all over the place. Like there's so much to learn. Like the occulted esoteric information is vital for us to thrive in life. Like they knew this. That's why they kept us from that information. It was important for us to think from the self, for the self, not in a selfish way, because you should never want to hurt anybody. That's bad for your soul. Like there's so many things. If people knew how the universe ran, if they knew how the universe operated, they would immediately change their lives, because they would realize, like you said, dang, it was me all along. Like they would realize they're perpetuating their own darkness in their own dark scenarios.
Well, and my book talks more about how we operate, what is going on inside, so that you can sit there and kind of sort through stuff. And somebody made an example. Well, no, somebody was talking about something. I'm like, that totally fits with this book, because I talk about like the subconscious mind and the different parts of that, and the superconscious mind and the different parts of that. And, the things that are going on inside of us that we mostly don't pay any attention to. And I'm going to liken it to when you go to the doctor. So there's your general practitioner, which usually doesn't know anything, but then they send you to the gastroenterologist, or they send you to the lung guy, or they send you to the guy who deals with your hormones because you might be having a thyroid issue. And so even with our physical body, we break it down into parts, and we have a deep understanding of this is this part, and this is how this part should be operating. And if it's not operating that way, there's something wrong. And so when we talk about ourselves and our mind and our psyche and this untold universe inside of us, there are distinct parts. And so in order to make all of it work, you need to have an understanding of like what they're supposed to do. Like, your large intestine, like if you're not pooping at all, like most people know, oh, well, I have some kind of intestinal digestive thing going on, so you don't have to know a lot, but you need to know something. And we don't know anything because nobody talks about it, really.
Yeah, no. And we're beginning to get there, where as within, so without. So if you have something inside, is this something you worked with in your medical intuitiveness? Like, let's just take the poop example because we just had it. And that's actually something a lot of people suffer with one way or the other. IBS is off the charts. So it would be interesting to know, like, just right there, give the audience an example of what it is you would do as a medical intuitive. Like if you had large intestinal issues, what would that mean on the outside of your world? Like we all know diet and all that, but would you have answers for them on the outside, like Chinese medicine style, where it's like, you are not expressing your sadness enough, or you are, too angry, like whatever the imbalance is there?
I mean, very much so, because sometimes okay. So if something is manifesting on the physical plane, usually there is an emotional piece that's sitting behind it. And so, if they're showing up with irritable bowel, it's like there's something that is bothering them, that they want to get rid of, because usually it's a dumping, and it's tied with diarrhea, but there's also irritation. And so, and I joke around because this is my very doctor term, I palpate. And I mean, I literally, I work with people by phone or by Skype, and I'll just sit there and be like, and I'll feel into it, because what is going on with you and your irritable bowel might not be what is going on with that other person, even though there's a certain amount of overlap. But, it's all based on our life experience, the trauma that we've had in our lives, etc. And I don't know exactly where you're streaming to, but I feel a need to say this out loud, and I'll try to couch it in non-censoring information. But I have noticed that a lot of people who have gotten have developed irritable bowel.
I could see that. I've seen a lot of people getting nerve issues too, and back issues, like they're explaining about spinal stuff, which is considering our main like connection with the divine is the spine. I find that hard to believe it's an accident. Like they're trying to sever it because they know in this age of expansion, like we are coming online, and they're trying to slow it down, stop it, or it's a test. You choose.
Keep us dumb. But, one of the things that I noticed about COVID was it made people pick a road. I mean, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people, and the people that were like, maybe so not so much, really had a lot of deep inner transformation that happened inside of them, and so even though it really sucked, and actually, I'm going to say it in a more simplistic way. That whole scenario put people through such a level of fear. It scared the crap out of everybody. And once you go through the valley of darkness, it's like, what worse could you do to me? What worse could you do to me?
It's funny, and this is why this is an example of getting strong yourself. But when that all came around, I was already well awake, well awake. I knew everything on that level. It helped me take it more seriously. It helped me embody it more. I started my channel then, so it pushed me that next level. But I literally, like, I don't want to be mean, but I'm not happy, but I was a little happy because, like, a lot of people woke up because of it. And, like, I couldn't help but be pleased I wasn't so alone anymore. I spent years and years and years going, she's just like schizophrenic or something. And to all of a sudden be like, oh my God, you were right. Like, that's like a person's dream. To all of a sudden, now I have multiple family members that at least see a large chunk of the truth. They're not all as far, awakened. And then you gather more people, and then you just see in society, you hear it online, like it's like a movement now getting bigger and bigger and bigger of just people that are awakening and going, this isn't right. Like, this is not okay. And we need to do something about it. And you can't do something about it until you realize something's even wrong. Like, everybody was in such denial. And even now with, like, the politics and the two-party systems, like, there's a large chunk of people going, it's not blue or red that's the problem, like,
It's the problem.
it's the whole system, the whole thing. There's way too much power there. That's never okay. Look throughout history of time. That has never been a good deal.
Well,
That's
there's the power, and then there's the level of lie.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that happened through all of that was people trusted the government. People trusted the media, because we were programmed to believe they have our best interest in mind, and they are going to provide us with truth, or as close to the truth as they possibly can. And it's turned out to be the big freaking lie. And the more we keep moving forward, the lie just seems more obvious and more blatant. And it's like, I just watched that, and that is, I yell. All right, there are some things that I watch that I like yell at the TV set, because it's like, no, I have to turn this off.
And that's exactly what we all have to do. Yeah, I started my education in journalism, like right at a high school, in a journalism school. I finished, school was fine, but then very quickly working in the world, it was not fine. It was not fine. And even in school, the whole point was bumpers and teasers. Like, they just want your fear. That's all they want. They just want your fear. That's what this is all about. It's fear, feeding a fear machine that it's just this perpetual cycle, and we'll never get off it until, coming back to your book here, until you, like, better the self and find whatever way works for you. It really doesn't. I mean, I don't see how you could do it without the divine, and whatever process or way that works for you. Like, I dabble in it all. And I think one day, have you ever heard of human design? Oh, good. Yeah. Human design, I think, is the first real thing that we're seeing. It's not super new, but, like, where it's bringing together some huge powerhouses. And if you've ever done a reading, like, oh my goodness, are they accurate? Like, it's
Really?
to a creepy degree. Like, have you ever done a reading?
I've never done a reading. I mean, I'm familiar with it. I've kind of looked at it, but I haven't ever, like, stepped off that ledge.
Yeah. I'm usually like that with a lot of, like, everything. I'm like, okay. But then that's just one thing that called to me, and I dove right in because it's just brings it all together. But that doesn't even have to be the thing, but it's just the first example. Like, it's bringing together Kabbalah, the Vedics, astrology. I'm missing some powerhouses there, but that's huge. I think there's at least 5 different major things that are included in it that are just like, but it's a beginning. Like, I think that's what the whole process that's going to like our alchemical process that's literally happening now. But we're in that, like, early stage of the, like,
but I think we're kind of past the early stage. I don't think that we, like, have hit a tipping point, but I think we're past the early stage. And you were we've been talking about fear, and I remember a meme came up on Facebook, And it's a picture of like a cartoon of this guy walking up a flight of stairs, and over the railing is this like giant monster. And the guy just looks at it, not afraid of it at all. And I feel like that's where a lot of people are. It's like you can sit there and try to perpetuate this fear thing. It's like, and now I think more and more people are going, okay, so what's the end game? And what are you, what's the reality? As an example, because we're live streaming, so it's current. There's all the riots on the college campuses. So when it was like the whole BLM and Antifa thing, people just kind of accepted these are just people doing whatever. But now, one of the things that I've been seeing is, well, who's funding them? They all have the same tenants. Where did they get all of these signs? These are college students, blah, blah, blah. And so there's a level of questioning and not accepting that, just a few years ago was happening, because they want that deeper truth. You can sit there and go, yeah, it's mostly peaceful while a building's on fire in the background. But people aren't accepting that. They're going, no, wait a minute, look, all the tents are the same. What's with that?
It's true. It's true. And even hypothetically, even if they paid for it themselves, which I don't, they kind of proved George Soros did pay for Antifa. Like that was proven. And I heard the other movement had proof too. But either way, if you wanted to pretend no one was paying for it, where's all the fear and the hate coming from? Like their own universities. And then the teacher, that's like, oh my goodness, that's like one of the biggest things too, that it was even before COVID. And I bet you it's what caused it, right? Like COVID was clearly a manifestation, even if it is man-made, but like that's how it works. Like our own collective consciousness like forces a human to like, and that's how the whole scenes play out. So regardless of the evil powers behind, if we at least wake up to the fact that there are people telling us things like shut off the news, like we were saying, like don't watch the news, don't watch anything mainstream, period, to keep yourself clean. Like you need to keep this clean to be able to move forward and move forward and move forward. Otherwise, we're just going to stay in that lower, like alchemical process that just repeatedly continues without ever like reaching that crystallized state of perfection, whatever your perfection is.
Unless you're watching the news to just keep on top of the lies.
Yeah.
I mean, because I watch the news. I mean, there are certain people that are, well, they're more podcast hosts, not like TV news, but I'll watch the news, and like my boyfriend will like to put like CNN on, like on Sunday morning, and like watch an hour, and I'm yelling at the TV set. But just to sit there and watch the crap, I am really about being in my integrity, So when I write something, when I'm working with a client, it's kind of like, if I'm not feeling it, I'm not feeling it. If I have to tell you something mean, I'm going to tell you something in a loving way. But I'm just going to tell you it because me being in my integrity is more important than taking your money. Period. Okay, I want your money, but you give me the money and I'm going to be in my integrity. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry, but I get what I get. And I just sit there and watch these people and just flat lying. I mean, I just can't see how in their mind they don't know that they're not lying, and how from any kind of soul place, they can have that come out of their mouth every week to such a level of, we believe it. And so I watch that just because it's flabbergasting to me to see that.
I agree. And it's the same thing. Reason I stepped away from life coaching myself because I couldn't handle it. I couldn't find a way to repeat myself that like, we've talked about this. You were told the answer. It's still the same answer. And the way that people will come at you and tell you all this stuff, like we were saying before about the blaming of families and stuff. And it's like, it's you.
Mm-hmm.
It's you. And like getting people to see that, and like getting people to go inside and find that place to like hear their truth. And the thing is, it's like you have to honor that, like, and I do, because that's your truth now. Like, I don't,
And
but I
sometimes
know I
it's
always had that
kind of
voice.
ugly. And
Yeah.
so like in my whole relationship dilemma, one of the realizations that I came to, like when I started working on the Dang It Was Me book, was that I allowed it. I allowed the relationships to be, and I allowed them to, you know, I have read a lot. A lot of my formative reading was early 80s text where they're sitting there talking about unconditional love, and so I treat these people with unconditional love, but me being unconditionally loving to them was just hurting me because it allowed them to stomp on me, and I didn't do anything. I allowed it. And having that realization that I allowed it to happen, that and I hate even saying it this way, didn't value myself enough, or I got kind of angry when I really understood about like unconditional, you have to love yourself first to be able to apply unconditional love. Unconditional love doesn't mean having somebody walk all over you, and that was just kind of like, oh, I wish somebody like explained that to me a long time ago, or maybe I wouldn't have been able to hear it. Maybe I wouldn't have been able to receive it. I really don't know, but I heard it then. And, and it made a huge difference. It's like, wow, you kind of, and you hate, it's like, well, you kind of did this to yourself because you put up with it. And that's kind of a hard realization to own. But
It's
if
true.
you don't want to do it anymore and you don't want to put up with it anymore, then you have to not put up with it anymore and change something, but not putting up with it anymore requires change. So
It's true. It's true. It requires deep change. And one thing I found with how I treated myself that changed the game was when I switched loving yourself. Because I feel like we all like, yeah, I love myself because we have to. Like, I don't think we're wired. We do love ourselves. I don't think it's possible to not love yourself.
I agree.
So you have to honor yourself in that actual like sacred tradition of honor.
Yeah.
Because we disrespect ourselves, like just even the way we eat, like even in the food we put in our body, like our mouths and our senses, like that addict part of ourselves. Like this one, we're all addicts in a point, especially with food. We all got that something, and like that's dishonoring. That's dishonoring. And then letting people treat you badly, that's dishonoring. And like getting that place of strength, because when you do that, then it actually becomes easier to be like, it's not okay to talk to me like that. And it grows from there.
Well, it's sometimes, people will make the biggest change when the light bulb comes on. So you can sit there and talk to them and talk to them and talk to them and talk to them. But until that light bulb comes on, and again, they can understand it on a body level, they can't make the change. And I'd like to say, because I need to wrap here a little bit, one of the things that I talk about in this book is, creating a practice, I'm going to say a spiritual practice, really a mindfulness practice. And in that, that is what sits underneath the change. It is kind of like building you up to move forward. Like you were talking about using that affirmation, I am happy. That is part of a mindfulness practice. And, I always get this look like, oh, well, that's going to be really hard. Like I have to practice. And it's like, well, yeah, have to practice, but I like to liken it to like dieting. Dieting in the big picture of the thing is really not that hard. You just don't eat. That's dieting. And if you decide to eat the entire bag of Oreo cookies or the bag of Doritos, you sit there and go, yeah, that probably wasn't a good thing. But then the next day, you get back on the saddle again and you start your practice again. Because even with this, and the practice is stop and take 4 deep breaths. Notice when your mind is going into negative thinking. Notice it, and just acknowledge it. I mean, how hard is that? It's just stopping and paying attention to what's going on inside. I mean, that is the first step, because as you sit there, as I was working on it, I like calling it bad brain. I would have days, like I'm doing pretty good, and navigating. And then something would happen and it would trigger me and it would leave me in like a place of ruminating or whatever I was doing in that moment. So I would just call it bad brain. And I would notice that I had bad brain. And it was like, okay, wow, you have bad brain. And I would work with my tools. I would be breathing or tapping or going to the gym or doing this or doing that. And sometimes it would be great. I'd use my tools, I'd move out of it, maybe be there for an hour or two, boom, back. I'm back. I'm happy again. And then sometimes not so much. And I had to give myself permission to have bad brain and allow my body to process it however it needed to. And usually in those periods, some deeper insight would come up, of like, oh, you're having bad brain and you're thinking about this thing over here, but you're thinking about this thing over here because this really old program, and you realize what the program is, came to the surface. So really they didn't do anything. They activated a trigger of mine. And, now I have to go and look at this person and go, but is it something that I need to worry about with this person? Or was it just, like I like calling it putting them into purgatory, so something happens and you get activated. And now you're going, okay, so this trigger has been activated, but I'm going to put you in purgatory because now I'm going to see if this is your behavior, because my trigger was activated and owning that and going, wow, okay, maybe that's something I need to look at and maybe that's something I need to work on, blah, 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 blah. But if you find that that same trigger is being activated by that other person, then it's like, well, do I need to talk to them about that or do I need to walk away?
Yeah, I completely agree. Triggers are actually a gift. I think of them as a gift because there's some program, there's something in there that's causing that to flare up. So what is that? And then you could thank it, because if you find it, it's gone. You can get rid of it. You don't even have to get rid of the person. You might, but usually it's something inside that you can release. So you were saying, go ahead.
I mean, sometimes it's something that you can release. Sometimes it is where the hard line is, and it's kind of like, okay, this is a bit. So as an example, I was going to say physical violence, but I won't even put that on the table. Their behavior is that they get upset and they get like very standoffish and cranky and whatever their behavior is, which activates you. And, but it gives you the opportunity to decide, am I okay being around that behavior that I know it's going to activate me over and over and over again, so it gives you the chance to, divine that line in the sand of, is it worth it?
That's very true. Very true. You mentioned you had to get going, so I'll give you a chance to let everyone know where they can find you. And I just want to thank you very much for being here. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you too. My website is soulhealer.com. That's soulhealer.com, soulhealer.com. But I would love, and you can get all of my books there on the webpage. There's a ton of articles and videos. All of my books are available at all of your major publishers, so Amazon, blah, blah. But I would also like to invite people. On Thursday night, I do a live stream. It's called Thursday Nights with Dr. Rita Louise, which is me. And I talk about some topic, like this past week was fear. And then I open up the chat, and people can get free on-air psychic readings from me. And so it's Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Central. It streams on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and then the replay is on different channels. The easiest place, and this is why I'm suggesting this, the easiest place to find it and to interact, because, you know, in the chat, which means you can get a reading because you can do the chat, is on YouTube. And my YouTube channel is Just Energy Radio. So that's 3 words, Just Energy Radio on YouTube. Click the live stream link or the live 7 p.m. Central on Thursday. Come hang out with me. We really have a lot of fun. You can ask questions. You can get a reading. We have a great group, and we'd love to see you there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Rita Louise. We really appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in here today with Transcending Ascension. Goodbye for now.